Hi guys, this is Hirosaki. This story is all about what if Naruto was a player of League of Legends. Meet Naruto Uzumaki, a not-so-regular teen with a passion for the MOBA game League of Legends even though he sucked at it. His life was normal until he was introduced to the supernatural world and found out he had an irregular sacred gear. So, the problem? How should he fend off Amano Yuma? With Lucian's relic pistols? There are so many choices. Before we start, kindly like and subscribe to this channel, and look over the description box for the author of this amazing storyline. Welcome aboard. Chapter 41. What do you think you are doing, old man? Naruto asked in a dead serious tone as he glared at Odin while holding Rost at his neck, stopping the old man from doing whatever lecherous thing he had intended to do to Akino before he could do it. Having felt a presence creeping up behind them just the moment before they could leave, Naruto had wasted no time to act, spinning around with Rost at the ready to behead the fool that dared to sneak up on him and his friends, only to see that it was none other than the chief deity of the Norse gods, Odin, who merely smirked in response and raised a single finger to stop the dark inside from reaching his neck. Geez, why so serious, you disrespectful brat? Odin chuckled as he flicked his finger and pushed Rost back, allowing Naruto to hold the dark-in weapon at his side. I simply wish to check out those irresistible curves of a beautiful young woman. There's no need for you to be so possessive. He added, laughing in amusement when Naruto pushed Akino a bit behind him to stand between her and Odin. What are you doing here, Odin-sama? Rosweiss asked, crossing her arms in annoyance as she glared at her former boss. I'm happy to see that you have found a place among the devils, Rosweiss. Odin rolled his eyes and said sarcastically while continuing to smirk at them though, why does everyone have to be so hostile? Is this really how you treat the one who has come to help you? Before any of them could do it, Azazel had spoken up first and answered Odin's question in a calm tone. Asia Argento has been taken by the enemies. Instantly, the smirk on Odin's face disappeared, his eyes widening slightly as he glanced over Naruto and the rest of Ria's peerage. So that devil kid really went that far, huh? The chief god of Norse mythology asked, his tone lacking its usual playfulness, as he seemed to have understood why the Gremory group was on edge. I'm terribly sorry. It's fine, Odin-sama. Ria shook her head and spoke to Odin, who raised a hand to stroke his beard in a calm manner. I take that you guys wish to come rescue your friend now, right? Odin asked and Naruto nodded his head back at him in response. As you might have already known by now, we are under attack from the Chaos Brigade, specifically the Old Malfactions and their allies. They have covered this game field in an incredibly powerful and almost unbreakable barrier, so you won't be able to do anything unless the one holding it is dealt with first. Then how did you get in? Naruto couldn't help but ask. The situation reminded him a little of the Battle of Reykjavik, where they had to take down certain enemies to bring down the barriers around the city to allow reinforcements to come aid them in the fight against the hero faction. When I gave one of my eyes to the Mimisbrunner, I became familiar with these types of demonic powers, magics, and other spells. The same applies for barriers too, so I know my way around them. Odin replied and removed his monocle to show his supposedly missing left eye. Instead of an eyeball, his eye socket was filled with a crystal with magical letters ingrained on it. With this, I can easily break this barrier and get you out, but it's obvious you don't want to leave this field just yet, correct? We will not leave until Asia is safe. Rias answered firmly as her peerage nodded their heads in agreement. Well, considering that Diodora is ally of Chaos Brigade, he has to be dealt with too. Odin spoke with a small smile before he was interrupted by a war cry from a small army of enemies charging at them from afar. The enemy is the chief of the Norse gods. Our name will rise if we take his head here. One of devils declared before they began to fire their demonic powers at him, blinded by false self-esteem and possible glory of being the one who had taken the head of an almighty god. As Naruto and the others prepared to take on the attacks that were shot at them, Odin merely waved his hand dismissively for them to step back, before he tapped his cane on the ground once, and the demonic powers were repelled and disappeared as a result, causing everyone but Rosweiss and Azazel to gasp and look at the Norse god in amazement. Go rescue your friend now. Leave these enemies to me and Azazel. Odin said with a small laugh as the enemy devils looked at him in shock, but it wasn't long before they recovered and got ready to attack again as they were joined by even more devils of the old Mal faction, becoming an even greater in number. Azazel didn't look impressed, however, as he walked up to stand next to Odin, smirking while spinning a familiar golden spear around in his hand. Odin then pointed his rod towards the youngsters and the Gremory group was enveloped in a small divine aura. That should protect you, but it will only last for a couple of minutes, so better hurry up. You heard him, go. Save Asia. Azazel said, making his wings appear before taking off into the air, as Odin turned his attention back to the army of devil terrorists again, his cane transforming into a long, three-pronged spear. The chief god then pointed his weapon forward and unleashed a blast of divine energy, which obliterated more than half the army devils in mid-lane before the others were killed by Azazel, who conjured hundreds of light weapons in the air, and then sent them down upon the devils below. Thanks, Odin GG. You aren't just a perverted old man after all. Naruto grinned at Odin, making him scoff and roll his eyes at him. Just go already, brat. The chief god then looked at Rosweiss, and told her with a small smirk, go with them. Protect your family. Yes. Odin-sama. The white-haired Valkyrie nodded her head, before casting a spell and form a protective barrier around the group, further fortifying their defense. Thank you, Odin-sama. I will leave this place to you. Rias bowed her head toward Odin before she spun around and led her peerage out of their base, heading into the bottom lane's jungle, the only path for them to avoid being seen and attacked immediately by the enemies that were flooding toward their base from all three lanes. A group of devils parted away from the main force and tried to stop them from advancing, but they were instantly dealt with by Naruto, Kiba, and Zenobia as the others' projectiles of demonic powers being deflected and repelled by Rosweiss's barrier and Odin's divine aura. By the time that the aura had disappeared and Naruto defeated the last devil to go after his friends, the Gremory group had made it into the forest and got away from the main battle. Ari, Akali, Kai-sa, I need you three to watch our flanks and behind. Naruto said upon summoning the K/DA in their original form to his side. Because the match was already cancelled, there's no need for him to restrain himself by just using the powers of Cain, Aphelios and Kiana. Furthermore, he had no reason to hold back when Asia was in danger. Do not let anyone sneak up on us. You got it, Naruto. Ari nodded her head to her summoner before running away using her spirit rush, disappearing behind the trees. Kai-sa then engulfed herself in plasma energy and dashed away in the opposite direction, leaving Akali to trail back behind them and watch them from behind as the group continued to advance forward. Where do you need me? Evelyn asked while running beside Naruto, her tone lacking its usual playfulness. Having been sitting in the spectator stand to watch the match with the rest of the K/DA, Evelyn knew what happened, and so the lack of emotion on her face was clear evidence that she wasn't in her usual good mood. You will know as soon as we got our hands on that fucking bastard. Naruto answered, allowing a dark smirk to appear on Evelyn's face as the demoness shrouded herself in darkness and disappeared from sight. Naruto, meanwhile, could still see her running with him as he regrouped with Rias and the others, who were all flying with their wings to move as fast as they could, with the exceptions being Kiba and Zenobia and Gasper, who was in his bat form. Come on, the river is just ahead. We are halfway to Blue Team's base. Rias informed them, and the group only sped up even more after that. Just before they could reach the river, however, Diodora's voice suddenly echoed throughout the field. I see that you guys are halfway to me already, Rias Gremory and her servants. Odin and Azazel are really a nuisance interfering with our game like that, so why don't we play another? How about we make it a substitute for our cancelled raiding game? We have no time for games, Diodora. Stop hiding in your base and come out here to face us. Rias shouted, knowing that if Diodora knew where they were at the moment then he could very well hear what they were saying. But where is the fun in doing that? It's not like you and your servants can stand a chance against me anyway. I'm giving you a chance to make it interesting, to excite me before I take Asia for myself. Let's have a match while using our pieces. The rule is simple, you can't use the same pieces again until you reach where I am at right now. Do not try to break this rule, because I can promise you that it won't be pretty for pure and innocent Asia. Naruto gritted his teeth and gripped his fists so hard that blood began to drip from his palms, but he knew that he couldn't risk Asia's safety. He had no choice but to follow whatever Diadora was planning, at least for now. So for the first match, I will be sending my 8 pawns and 2 rooks. By the way, all of my pawns have promoted to a queen. Rias and her servants widened their eyes in shock at that. Yes, it's 8 queens from the beginning, but that should be fine for Rias Gremory, who possesses powerful servants. Diadora mocked before the aforementioned 10 arrived before them via teleportation magic circles, standing on the other side of the river with their aura of demonic power overflowing. TCH, I should expect as much from a scum like you. Rias scoffed before she turned around to look at her group before announcing loudly, very well, I will show you what my beloved servants are capable of. Yuto, Zenobia, Kaneko and Gasper, you 4 will take the lead for us. Wait, I can. Naruto argued, giving his girlfriend a hard look as he stepped forward to talk to her. However, before he could say anything, Rias had already turned toward him and told him firmly, no Naruto, I want you to save your anger for Diadora, because I know that even I won't be able to stop you when we reach him. Rias. Naruto said, his eyes softening a little. Yeah, just leave this one to us, Naruto-kun. Kiba, who was sporting a confident smile, said as he stepped forward and patted Naruto on his shoulder, making the blonde turn his head around to look at his comrade. Zenobia nodded her head in agreement as she put Durandal on her shoulder and stepped up to stand beside her fellow knight of Rias Gremory. Asia is my friend too, you know, Naruto. Even if I want to kill Diadora myself when we reach him for what he did, I know that I will only get in your way. She finished, glancing to the spot where Evelyn was standing in her demon shade form. I will also do my best. I'm also a man of Rias Gremory's peerage. Gasper, who while was extremely nervous, was able to gather his courage to speak up, his fist in the air, as he walked up with Kaneko, who simply gave Naruto an assuring nod before joining Kiba and Zenobia as they started making their way toward the group of promoted pawns and rooks. Guys. Naruto called before the 4 could enter the river, making them turn around to look at him. Good luck. He said while smiling at them, before walking back to stand next to Rias and giving her a small nod, which she responded with one of her own and a soft smile. The battle began, and Naruto could see why Rias had sent out Kiba, Zenobia, Kaneko and Gasper to face the 10 members of Diadora's peerage, 8 of whom were pawns promoted to queens and 2 were rooks. The rooks were known for their strong offense and defense power, but they were also famous for being slow in movements, allowing high-speed fighters like Kiba, and one who was also as relentless as Zenobia, to beat them quite easily. Let's do this, Zenobia. Kiba shouted as he rushed toward the enemy rooks with Zenobia before the 2 rooks could even get in range to attack them. Although they moved surprisingly fast for their positions, both of them were no match for Kiba and Zenobia, who cut them down in quick succession with Durandal and the Sword of Betrayer. Their strong defense, meanwhile, allowed them to get back to their feet, but the divine aura of Zenobia's holy sword suddenly increased in power several times over before the blue-haired girl slashed it down, unleashing a crescent-shaped arc that rushed toward Diadora's rooks at blinding speed, blasting off everything in its path with its tremendous holy power. The slash enveloped both rook and the entire area of the river around them, generating an explosion that echoed across the field as it hit its intended target. Gasper, Kaneko, cover Zenobia and Kiba's attack. Rias gave the order, and instantly the 2 youngest members of their group rushed in to gather around Zenobia, who stabbed her sword down to support herself while breathing heavily. The attack just then looked like it had taken a lot from her, but Zenobia had done her part. Now it was the other 3's turn. As the group of pawns, who had managed to dodge Zenobia's attack thanks to their queen promotion, rushed in to try taking down a worn-out Zenobia, Kaneko unleashed a barrage of Senjutsu aura blasts at them, forcing them back to dodge. Utilizing the night attribute of the queen, there of them engaged Kaneko in combat while the other four tried to take Kiba on, only for the girl to not only match them in speed, but overwhelm them in strength, seemingly having no problem defending both Zenobia and Gasper, who was nowhere near the level of a capable combatant. Leaping back to their side of the river, the group of pawns prepared for another attack, only for Kiba to charge at them, and at first glance it looked like he was about to take all 8 pawns on by himself. Despite his skills and speed, the male knight of Rias Gremory was vastly outnumbered, and the odds seemingly was against him, until a smirk suddenly appeared on his face as he dodged to the side at the last possible moment, revealing 2 small orbs with a yellow gear on top flying toward the enemy pawns. Before they could react, the 2 orbs enlarged and grew to the size of a basketball ball before detonating at the same time. But instead of creating a heat explosion, they generated a dome field that stopped time itself in its range, freezing 3 pawns on their track and allowing Kiba to go in and cut them down with relative ease. Finally acknowledging the danger, the rest of the pawns began to dodge, as Kaneko threw more time bombs that she got from Gasper at them, though it soon proved to be excessively difficult due to Kiba attacking them with his great speed. While preparing to go rescue Asia, Azazel had given them full access to his shop, and among the items that they had grabbed for the mission were Gasper's exclusive items, Xylion's time bombs, special hextech devices that absorbed the time-controlling power of its wielder and unleashed it when detonated, giving Gasper a much easier time using the ability of his sacred gear. Though because he wasn't very good at aiming, yet, and his arms were rather weak, it had been decided that Kaneko would be the one who threw them for him, as her great physical strength allowed her to throw those bombs faster than a speeding bullet. Still, since the bombs were thrown in a simple manner and less effective than Gasper's direct gaze, it did not take it long for Diodora's pawns to catch on to their patterns as well as range and dodge them before they could be caught in the frozen field. By the time that they had managed this, however, Kiba and Kaneko had taken down another one of them. "You are just a rook." One of the pawns growled in frustration as Kaneko maneuvered between her attacks at great speed and grace to get closer to her. "How are you moving so fast?" she screamed, as Kaneko leaped into the air and punched her square in the face. Another pawn tried to aid her, but Kaneko had already disappeared, moving so fast that her body became a blur before she got behind her and attacked with a senjutsu palm strike, immobilizing her on the ground before the shell-shocked girl could even muster a word. "Gyasukuin's bombs don't just stop time, you know," Kaneko said as she juggled a time bomb in her right hand, which was glowing while the gear was moving slowly, that she had received from Gasper before rushing in to aid Kiba. The cat girl then looked to the side to see Kiba finishing up the remaining pawns, having borrowed Zenovia's Durandal, and wielded them against the enemies in an even deadlier manner than Zenobia herself could do. "Good work, all of you." Once the battle had finished, Akino spoke with a genuine smile, as she and Ria stepped up to bind the surviving members of Diodora's peerage with a spell. Naruto moved toward Zenobia and helped her back to her feet, receiving a thankful smile from her as Kiba walked to her and returned Durandal to her. Since he was not its chosen wielder, excessive use of the sword would only damage him more than the enemies could ever do. "It's done," Rias announced as she stood up, having finished tying up the last of the pawns. "Now, let's get going." With that said, Rias crossed the river with her group, and proceeded into the enemy's jungle. It did not take it long for them to encounter the next group of Diodora's servants, who were his bishops and queen. "We were expecting you, Rias Gremory-sama. I shall fight you here as my master's queen. The 2 behind me are Diodora-sama's bishops." "Very well then, allow me to go, Rias," Akino said simply as she stepped forward, her 2 hands crackling with holy lightning. "I will join this round as well." Rosweiss nodded her head and volunteered herself. "If this is a battle of magic power, then I definitely will not lose." Rias crossed her arms, but nodded her head nonetheless at the 2. "Very well then. Good luck to you too." With that, the battle between magic users began, with Diodora's queen unleashing a tremendous pillar of demonic power at the Akino and Rosweiss, but the latter instantly stepped in and raised a barrier in front of her and Akino to shield them from the attack. Naruto had not seen Rosweiss in action before, but he had been told by Rias that as a Valkyrie his civic teacher had magic power great enough to be recognized for her position as the bodyguard of Odin. Even Le Fay, the descendant of the legendary witch Morgan Le Fay, had said that Rosweis's talent in Norse magic was on a level of its own. Furthermore, using the trait of a rook, Rosweis should be able to use defensive magic to an even greater effectiveness, and it had shown when her barrier was able to withstand the enemy queen's demonic power attack. Our turns. Let's go, Rosweis-sensei. Akino cried, and Rosweis lowered her barrier down to allow Akino to unleash a strike of holy lightning at the enemies, but the enemy bishops behind their queen quickly did their job by channeling their magic power flowed into the queen while maintaining a defensive barrier around her, serving as her supports. Combining their strength, the three magic combatants of Diodora's peerage created numerous magic seals in the air that unleashed a barrage of spells at the teacher-student duo. Such combo of magic attacks was not shown in the video recording of Diodora's fight with Sikvera, though Rias had expected that the queen and bishops could produce that level of fire powers. On the other hand, while the enemies could have already suspected that Rosweis was strong in defensive magic because she was a rook, they definitely did not know that she was already even more powerful in offensive magic. Let's combine our strength too, Akino-san. Rosweis spoke as she outstretched her arms and created herself even more magic circles than the three servants of Diodora, causing them to stumble back in shock at the insane display of magic. Even the field began to shake violently at the gathering of Rosweis's demonic power. Akino, who managed to recover from her own surprise first, unleashed a thunderous strike of holy lightning that only paled in comparison to the bombardment of magic of almost every attribute and type from Rosweis, blowing up half the forest before them and leaving the enemy queen and bishops on the ground with injuries and wounds all over their bodies once the smoke and dust had been cleared. That was amazing, Rosweis-sensei. Akino complimented as the rest of the group ran up to them and showered her with praises, making the former bodyguard of Odin blush a bit. Yeah, you are really strong. Naruto nodded his head in agreement. He had never seen such a level of magic power like that before, even from Akino and Rias. Ah, thank you. Rosweis smiled nervously while looking at them. All right, let's go everyone. Asia is just right up ahead. Rias spoke, giving Naruto a meaningful nod before the two of them led their group forward. With Rosweis's bombardment of magic already destroying half the forest before them, the path was clear for them to reach Asia, Diodora, and his remaining servants. Rias and Akino occasionally fired off their own attacks from behind their magic barrier, but the enemy bishops behind their queen quickly did their job as their magic power flowed into the queen, serving as support and alternative fuel, followed by even more magic seals that fired even more demonic powers. This kind of combo was not shown in the video recording of Diodora's fight with Sikvera, thus everyone did not expect that the queen and bishops alone could produce that kind of fire power. Once they had entered Blue Team's base, it did not take it long for them to spot Diodora, who was comfortably lounging back in a large, comfy throne with a bowl of grapes in his lap as well as a thin glass of wine between his fingers next to the blue nexus, his two knights standing before him with their swords in hand. In stark contrast, Asia was being imprisoned within the blue crystal of the nexus, her arms and legs bound by ropes and chains. Asia. Naruto instantly felt himself once again being consumed by anger when he saw Asia and Diodora, who had a smug smile on his face despite the fact that he had just lost more than half of his peerage to them. The blonde nun smiled weakly when she heard her name being called. Her red knuckles were clear evidence that she had been trying to break out of the blue crystal. And Naruto-san? Let her go, you sick fuck. Rias said, directing her murderous gaze at Diodora, who merely took a sip of his drink. Such vulgar mouth, coming from the heiress of the Gremory. This is the reason why I can never stand girls like you. Diodora chuckled as he extended his hand forward, making his two knights charge at them, but the game continues, let's see how you fare against the two strongest. But before he could even finish his sentence, Naruto had leaped over Rias with gravitum in his hand and fired black hole-like projectiles at the two servants of Diodora before activating its powers, stopping them in their tracks and completely immobilizing them in the spots. Before they could even try to freeze themselves, Naruto shot down with Rost in hand and swung the scythe and the reaping slash, shattering their swords when the two girls tried to defend themselves with them and sending them flying away with deep gashes on the side of their bodies. "You're next," Naruto growled as he stood up and shook the blood off of his scythe. However, Diadora did not even look worried. "I would have felt threatened by your threats, Naruto Uzumaki, if you weren't the most pathetic low-born fool to ever grace my sight," Diadora stated pleasantly as he put his glass of wine down his throne. "Still, I have to thank you for saving Asia from those fallen angels back then. It is thanks to you that she could find her way back to me after all this time." "You know why I want Asia for myself, Naruto Uzumaki?" Diadora then stood up from his throne and continued, "I actually have something of a fetish for nuns and sisters. I think the ultimate test of skill for me is taking women, who are so devoted to their religion, and making them submit to me instead. There's nothing more fun for me than slowly breaking down a nun and seeing them worshipping me as if I am their lord himself." Diadora lightly chuckled, before breaking down into a full laugh, "But you see, of all the nuns that I have broken, there is none as beautiful and as pure as Asia, so I couldn't help myself. I thought after getting her branded as a traitor and excommunicated from the church I could swoop in and take her, but she was snatched up by those fallen angels before I could do it." Diadora then scoffed, before another pleasant smile appeared on his face, "But thankfully, you rescued her and allowed her to return to me. Are you done?" Naruto growled, "Since you're still the heir of the Astaroth and a relative of Ajuka-san, the man I deeply respect, I will give you a chance to surrender. A certain champion of mine is dying to get her hands on you, and I can assure you that the longer you make her wait, the harder she will be." The blonde finished, and even though he wasn't looking at Evelyn, he knew that the corner of her mouth just curved up into a creepy smirk, like that of a dark opera mask with a smiling face. "And what if I refuse?" Diadora asked simply, as if he didn't think it was too much of a threat. "Then I will beat you to a bloody pulp, and then give you over to her," Naruto answered coldly, as he held up Rost and pointed the blade at Diadora. "Either way, you will be the first being of this world to learn what agony's embrace means." "So annoying, you and that children's game of yours," Diadora mocked before holding his hand out and raising his palm. "Very well then, allow me to show you the difference in power of a high-class devil and a low CRRCK. Rias had an urge to cringe when she heard that sound of Naruto's fist shrinking into Diadora's face and breaking his skull. Before he could even recover or cry out in pain, Naruto had grabbed him by the back of his head and smashed him through his throne, making it flip over as Diadora fell face first into the ground, blood flowing down from his badly damaged face. "Drink your phoenix tears," Naruto said simply as he walked back to Rost and picked the Darkin weapon up. "I know that, like us, you have two of them in your possession. Use them to recover so I can break that smile in again." Diadora did just that, taking out the 2 vials of phoenix tears from his pocket and drank them both. He almost dropped them because of dizziness, but still the 2 vials of phoenix tears did the trick and allow his face to mend back to its original shape. Naruto had noticed that none of Diadora's servants had used phoenix tears to recover during the fights against the members of their group, so it's obvious to him that the bastard had kept them for himself. "You are going to regret this, you lowborn piece of shit." Diadora gritted his teeth as he unleashed his demonic power, but Naruto swiftly dodged to the side, leaving a trail of dark aura behind him as he sidestepped the attack. "I am a high-class devil. I am the relative of the current Beelzebub. There is no way that a noble blood like myself will lose to a lowly, filthy reincarnated devil like you. You know, Razor Phoenix used to say the same thing before I broke his wills to keep on fighting," Naruto stated coldly as he dodged a barrage of spells from Diadora, causing the high-class devil to grow in frustration. "But at least the guy is not a twisted, mentally fucked shit like you," Naruto said, as he spun Rost around and cleaved a fireball in half before rushing toward Diadora, who quickly attempted to conjure layers upon layers of magic barrier to defend himself. Holding Rost behind him, Naruto enveloped himself in shadow and became intangible with Kane's shadow step ability, allowing him to move through Diadora's barriers like they were nothing but air to send a direct hook to the side of his face, sending him crashing through his own barrier before falling down and rolling on the ground like a ragdoll. I know you have one last trump card up your sleeve. Use it. Naruto commanded as he cracked his bloody knuckle. Despite having a sense of satisfaction for being able to beat up Diadora finally, Naruto couldn't help but feel nothing but rage. Shut up, you low-born shit. And with that, he took out what Naruto and everyone had been waiting for, an Opha snake, one of the snakes that she had created for Chaos Brigade before she left them, and switched to their side. Naruto. Stand back, Rias. Rias tried to go in and aid him, knowing full well what would happen if Diadora used the snake to empower himself, but her boyfriend stopped her from doing so in a cold, chilling tone, making Rias instinctively take a step back in caution. Naruto had never spoken to her in that tone before. Naruto then turned back to Diadora, who raised the snake over his head, and let his mouth hang wide open. The black snake then slowly dropped itself into his mouth, and slithered down his throat. The ORC watched on as the twisted Astaroth heir swallowed the power-manifested creature whole before looking down and wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. Instantly, the ground underneath him cracked and the air around him exploded, as Diadora unleashed the full might of his empowered demonic power. The Astaroth heir laughed maniacally as his aura became a blazing flame, so great that everyone in the Devil's Rift could see it and feel the tremendous pressure. Yes. This is it. This is the power of Ophis at full force. Diadora roared in laughter before he held his hand out and unleashed a pillar of raw demonic power, forcing Naruto to run to the side to dodge. But the Astaroth heir did not let up and turned the pillar of demonic power after the blonde, chasing him across the blue base. Ah ha ha ha. Ha 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 ha. Run, you filthy fly. Twirling around when he stepped onto the eastern wall of the base, Naruto then launched himself at Diadora at blinding speed, becoming intangible once again using Shadow Step to maneuver himself in the air between Diadora's attacks before reaching Diadora. The Astaroth heir instantly unleashed an empowered barrier that would disintegrate everything its touch in the spot, but Naruto suddenly disappeared from sight entirely, leaving only the image of the dark scythe above Diadora's head and a dark aura around his body. Despite the triumphant he had felt earlier, Diadora couldn't help but feel a chilling shiver running down his spine when he heard Naruto's mechanical chuckle echoing in his mind for a second before the blonde bursting out from the Astaroth heir himself, finishing the assassinating move, Umbral Trespass, with a deadly slash across Diadora's torso. Gah! The Astaroth heir cried in pain as he fell down while holding his chest, trying to stop the bleeding. At the same time, he tried to attack Naruto, who instantly reacted to his attempt by dashing toward him with a Untitled Chakram that were glowing in 3 different colors, Kiana's weapon, and hurled it forward when he was right before Diadora, sending out a wind blast that knocked Diadora back toward a Nexus turret before exploding outward violently, sending the structure crumbling down upon the Astaroth heir. Not bad. Rost chuckled as the only eye on the dark inside seemed to shiver in excitement. Shut up, Rost. I don't need your opinion right now. Boss. The Darkin mocked, with a hint of amusement in his voice as Naruto walked toward Diadora, who was trying to get back up to his feet, and kicked him in the face, hard enough to break his nose, but not enough to leave him fatally injured again. Because it's time for him to reintroduce the bastard to a certain champion of his. Evelyn, he's yours. Finally. The ancient demon emerged, becoming visible once again with a gleeful look on her face, as she stood over Diadora, smiling sweetly down at him as her lashers moved slowly and dangerously above her head. Why hello there. Remember me? Evelyn asked, bending down to look at Diadora. Her face then twisted and became like that of her smiling face in her demon shade form for a split second, but that was more than enough for Diadora to become extremely terrified of her. Let's have a lot of fun from now on, shall we? Don't kill him, Eve. Naruto said, walking up to the ancient demoness who got some ropes from Akino. Make it slow and painful. Plus, he might hold valuable intel of Chaos Brigade that can benefit the Alliance. Make sure that he talks and tells us everything. You don't have to tell me, Han. Evelyn giggled as she leaned forward and kissed Naruto on the cheek. Thank you for letting me have him. now go free Asia. Will do. Naruto said, taking a deep breath as he turned his attention over to Asia, who was smiling in relief while looking at him as Rias and the rest of her peerage gathered around them. How did they even put her in there anyway? He couldn't help but ask, walking up to Rias. It will hurt Asia inside if we break it down with force, so let me use my demonic power. It's much easier and safer for her that way. Rias told him softly, receiving a nod from Naruto as he reached up and placed a hand on the surface of the crystal, right before Asia's hand as she put both of hers on the other side. Naruto said, smiling at the blonde who returned him with her own loving smile. Hold on just a bit more, Asia. We will get you out. She then turned toward Rias, who had begun to use her demonic power to break through the glowing blue crystal by pushing her hand that was covered in a focused aura of power of destruction slowly forward. Since it was designed to not be easily destroyed by the combined powers of an entire peerage, it would surely take her some time to create a hole large enough for Asia to crawl through. Bucho-san. You don't have to call me that, Asia. Rias shook her head and gave Asia a comforting smile. After all, I consider you my little sister. Then. Can I call you Rias-Wani-sama? It will be my pleasure, Asia. The crimson-haired girl warmly replied. Ugh, this scene is gonna make me puke. All heads then turned to Rost when he said that. Shut up, will you? Naruto scoffed and rolled his eyes at the Darkin, before he held him out toward Evelyn's direction. The demon was thinking of the best way to bind Diadora with the ropes in her hands, and couldn't decide whether or not she should tie him up with his blood vessels or his own skin as well. Both options aroused her. Of course you want me to give you to Eve? You Darkin don't like her very much, do you? I will pass, thank you very much. The Darkin weapon replied. Why are you still here though? Naruto couldn't help but ask while rubbing his chin thoughtfully. Normally, a weapon would disappear when he replaced it with something else, but Rost seemed to be lingering around even as Kiana's elemental chakram had gone back to Runeterra. Could it be because he was a sentient weapon, and regarded as a champion alongside Kane, that he could stay or leave how he wished just like Evelyn or Ari? Well, It came faster than Naruto could react. Before Kane could finish his sentence, Naruto suddenly felt a dreadful sensation in the air. It was a tremendous amount of killing intent. His senses were instantly put on high alert, and the blonde spun around just in time to see light starting to gather around the crystal where Asia was being imprisoned within. Rias, who was standing there beside the crystal, had a look of shock on her face as she tried to figure out what's going on. Instantly, Naruto dropped Rost and ran as fast as his feet could carry him. Time seemed to slow down drastically as Naruto tried to reach out for Asia, his hand reaching for her just as the entire crystal was enveloped in bright light. Rias wrapped both arms around the crystal, as if she had realized what was happening, but there's little that she could do, and Kiba, who was standing much closer to them, had no choice but to go in and grab his master, pulling her away before she could be teleported away as well. Naruto, on the other hand, had hoped that he could make it in time, but it was too late. Asia had disappeared within the light as Naruto's hand grabbed onto empty air, his body tumbling on the ground as he lost his balance. Kiba and Rias fell back on their back, and the crimson-haired girl didn't even have time to ask Kiba what he had done. She could only look at the spot where Asia had been, still trying to comprehend what had just happened. What happened? Where's Asia? Zenobia was the first to speak while everyone was still trying to process what happened. Hey, Naruto. What was that like just now? Where is Asia? Zenobia's tone began to quiver, but Naruto did not have an answer for her, as he stared at the empty nexus with a look of shock on his face. So, you have been defeated here, Diadora, even with a snake of Ophis we have given to you. A calm voice was heard, causing everyone but Naruto to turn their heads toward that direction, and see a man dressed in black armor with a cape walking toward them from outside the base. He had long brown hair that went to his hips with many bangs covering his right eye. It appears that our plans need to be adjusted. Who are you? Rias asked cautiously. She and Aquino were the first two to notice his scary aura of power, but it did not take it long for the others to see it as well. The man casted a disdainful gaze towards Rias as he answered her question. It's my first time meeting you, sister of the annoying fake Satan. My name is Shalba Beelzebub, the true successor of the great original Beelzebub. I'm different from the relative of the fake one over there on the ground. Then he turned his gaze to Diodora. Diodora Astaroth, we lent you our power and look where you are right now. In the match against Agars, you used Ophus's snake without my authorization, and had the enemy see our plan. You are even more stupid than I thought. Diodora, who was on the ground, didn't seem to notice the insult in Shalba's tone, as he struggled against the ropes that were binding him and shouted out desperately. Shalba, please help me. If it is with you, we can kill them. But Evelyn did not let him finish, as she raised her right foot and stomped down the side of Diodora's face, impaling the heel of her high heel through his cheeks, effectively shutting him up even as Diodora tried to scream and filling his mouth up with blood. You? Evelyn asked in a low, dangerous tone as a wave of demonic shadow flared uncontrollably into the air from her body. Were you the one who did that to Asia? Where is she? I sent her to a place beyond this dimension. The crystal should keep her surviving for a couple seconds, but it will also become the very thing that gives her a slow and agonizing death. Shalba answered simply before continuing while looking at Rias. I will also have you die here, Rias Gremory. Shalba declared his intentions in a cold tone. I'm here to destroy the blood relatives of the fake Mao. It won't mean anything if we don't have them taste despair first before we kill them. You scum! For you to kill Asia of all things, I absolutely won't forgive. Rias cried in rage as she enveloped herself in a tremendous, ground-shaking aura of power of destruction. Beside her, Aquino did the same thing with her holy lightning, not caring that the overwhelming holy attribute was hurting her own body. Kiba created his holy demonic sword, followed by the rest as they glared murderously at Shalba. In rage, Zenobia couldn't control herself and threw herself at Shalba with Durandal glowing with a ridiculous amount of holy power, even greater than what she had done before. I won't forgive you. I won't forgive you. I will cut you. I will cut you up and kill you. Weak. With that single word, Shalba used his own magic to conjure a barrier that easily withstood the power of her holy sword before he proceeded to strike back at Zenobia with a blast of demonic power, sending the girl to fall back to the ground. Zenobia tried to get back to her feet, but tears were flowing down her cheeks as she looked up and glared venomously at Shalba. How could you? Asia. She is my friend. She is a kind girl. Kinder than anyone. Why? Why? Because reincarnated devils are all garbage and need to be eliminated from this world. Shalba stated coldly. It starts with her and every one of you will be next. The descendant of the original Beelzebub then raised his hand in the air and summoned his demonic powers along with a hive of bees to his side, as his power then increased to an even greater level. As Rias and her peerage got ready to fight Shalba, they were interrupted by an almost painful but full of anger shriek from Evelyn, who lost control of her own power with her appearance becoming unstable. Darkness wrapped around her and she became like that of a true demon, a terrifying formless being with the face of death itself. Interesting. Shalba arched an eyebrow in amusement as he raised a barrier to shield himself from Evelyn as the ancient horror rushed toward him. Once I killed Rias Gremory and her servants, I will take you back to Cow's brigade. You shall make a fine experiment, demon. He said, completely unfazed by the cracks that appeared on his barrier as Evelyn's shapeless face banged violently against the surface of it. Shalba then raised his other hand and snapped his head to the side to create a magic circle to block Naruto's attack with Rost. Ah, Naruto Uzumaki. The leader of our group is very interested in your sacred gear. Shalba said as he held Naruto back with relative ease. I shall take you back as well. Even if we lose here today, your capture will be as good as any victory. But Naruto was unresponsive to Shalba's statement, as he continued to push forward until cracks started appearing on Shalba's shield. Evelyn, who was glaring at Shalba with her twisted eyes, suddenly felt that something wasn't right about her summoner, and reverted back to her chosen form with a look of shock on her face. "No," she whispered before running toward Rias and the others, who had a look of confusion on their face as they looked between Evelyn and Naruto. "Get back, all of you!" She screamed and unleashed her darkness to shield the group away just as Rost slipped from Naruto's hand and flew into the air. The blonde had a look of absolute rage on his face that couldn't be described with words while tears were trickling down his cheeks. "I will kill you." With those words, Rost broke out in a fit of maniacal laughter and swung himself down, stabbing his blade into Naruto's chest. Dark energy began to gather around Naruto as he coughed out a mouthful of blood and screamed, his eyes boiling with blood as snarled like an animal. The blonde began to glow, with reddish electricity crackling around his body, which was then compressed into a small orb like that of a mini-sun before exploding violently, knocking Shalba back. When the flow of dark energy finally stopped, and Evelyn unwrapped her shadow around Rias and Kas, they all looked up to see the one now holding the darkened scythe in his hands was no longer Naruto, but a towering demon-like being with a skull-like face and two large horns on the side of his head. "That's..." Rias uttered in horror as Evelyn stood protectively in front of her, and her peerage, snarling angrily at both Shalba and the being. The situation had really gone from bad to worse. "Interesting, so you have a power like this too, Naruto." Before Shalba could finish it, the being had already appeared before him and grabbed his face, lifting him into the air with a dark chuckle. "No more Naruto. Only Rost." Chapter 42. "You. What the hell are you?" Gritting his teeth in anger, not believing that he had been caught off guard so easily, Shalba Beelzebub asked as he struggled against the insanely strong grip of the demonic being that had just introduced itself as Rost. "I am the Undoing." The Darkin leaned his face toward Shalba and spoke in a low tone, one that sent chill down the descendant of the original Beelzebub's spine as he stared into the glowing eyes of Rost. The corner of his lips curved up into a smirk, as he clenched his hands tighter around Shalba's skull, making him cry out in pain before gathering his demonic power and unleashing a swarm of bees, which created numerous magic circles around the Darkin. In the blinding flash of light, every magic circle was set off, generating an explosion that caused the area around them to rumble. Shalba was launched out of the cloud of smoke, crashing into the ground with his body and clothes smoking, but otherwise looked unharmed. Smirking sadistically, the descendant of the original Beelzebub looked up at the cloud of smoke in the air and expected to see Rost falling out of it dead. When even after the smoke had dispersed, however, Rost couldn't be seen anywhere, and it was at that moment Shalba felt a presence behind him, causing him to snap around and see that it was none other than the Darkin, who was simply standing there looking at the claws of his hands, without a single scratch on his body. This will take some time getting used to." Rost spoke while chuckling darkly, as Shalba jumped back to create some distance between him and the Darkin. "Now, where were we?" Faster than Shalba could blink, Rost had dashed toward him and struck with his scythe. Shalba was able to dodge it at the last possible millisecond and gathered his demonic power for a counterattack. Before he could do it, however, he was launched across the field by a fist straight to his face, sending him flying through the wall of the empty blue nexus before crashing into the reviving fountain. On his hands and knees, the brown-haired devil tried to pick himself up, but Rost moved even faster than before, leaving a trail of dark energy behind him as he appeared before Shalba once again and slashed his scythe upward. The descendant of the original Beelzebub had no choice but to cast a defensive barrier around his body, but the tip of the darkened weapon simply pierced through it, shattering the spell like it was made of glass. "Gar." Shalba choked, coughing a mouthful of blood as Rost impaled his scythe through his torso. That, however, did not stop him from looking up at Rost and giving him a hateful, murderous gaze, which the Darkin simply responded with a mocking smirk. "You monster! I will show you the strength of Ark." With a gasp of shock, Shalba found himself once again being thrown across the battlefield, but this time all that was left of him was his upper half of his torso as Rost grabbed his hair and pulled his scythe at opposite directions after twisting the sharp edge to the side, tearing his body clean off with his torn organs dropping on the ground. Pitiful, pitiful fool. Rost laughed as he shook Shalba's lower remain off of his scythe while turning around to look at Shalba, whose eyes were staring directly at him with one last look of terror before his body began to slowly disperse. You're not special, just one of many. With that said, Rost swung his scythe, shaking off the blood and a small piece of organ of the devil hanging on his blade before slowly turning around to face Rias and her group, who were all staring at him with a look of shock as Evelyn, Ari, Kayase, and Akali stood protectively in front of them. Splendid work there, Rost. Evelyn spoke up, breaking the uncomfortable silence between the two parties as she stepped forward a bit too quick for my taste, but at least it got the job done. She stated playfully, before hardening her gaze and directed it toward the dark inn, asking in a cold, chilling tone, playtime's over. Let our summoner go now. Why? Can you see that I am just getting started? Rost replied while chuckling darkly, his scythe glinting dangerously in his hand. So be it then. Saying that, Kayase put on her mask and dashed toward Rost with plasma emitting from her whole body while firing a barrage of void blasts at the Darkin. Smirking, Rost swiped his blade to the side and generated a violent gush of dark red energy to negate the shots before shooting his hand out and grabbing Kayase by her neck before she could continue on with another assault. Stabbing her lashers into the ground, Evelyn unleashed her shadow spikes toward Rost, forcing him to let go of Kayase, and giving Akali the opening to leap over him and throw her kunai at his back. Growling, the Darkin snapped around to attack her, but the rogue assassin had dropped her smoke bomb and disappeared into it. Rias, you and your friends need to get out of here. Ari said quickly as she assisted her three friends, bombarding the Darkin with wave after wave of foxfires. We cannot protect you and fight Rost at the same time, she said, before raising her hand and creating a barrier of foxfire, a skill that she had learnt from Yasaka and the other Kitsune Yukai, when Rost suddenly rushed toward them at blinding speed, slowing him down just enough for Kayase and Evelyn to go in and pull him back, their battle carrying to the field outside the blue base. How can we leave when Naruto is in danger? Rias asked as she took a step toward Ari along with the rest of her peerage. We can help. No, you cannot. Ari snapped at them, causing the crimson-haired heiress to take a step back from the nine-tailed fox champion in surprise. Ari took a deep breath before she said, Rias, you know Naruto. If any of you gets hurt here by Rost, he will surely blame himself. We have already lost Asia. The Gumiho paused, her voice breaking as tears welled up in her eyes. The loss of Asia seemed to hit her just as hard as it had hit them. Do you really want Naruto to be plunged even deeper in anger and despair? I understand. Nodding her head solemnly, the crimson-haired heiress then turned her head to look at Rost, who laughed maniacally as he slashed his scythe through Evelyn's torso, but the demoness seemed to have been waiting for him to do just that, as her form dispersed into shadow and wrapped around him, blinding his vision and allowing Akali and Kayase to go in. But can you really bring Naruto back? Isn't when a Darkin takes over their host's body, the host will? Rias asked with a shaking voice as she knew what would happen to a Darkin's host, having done some research on the Darkin when she found out that her boyfriend had been able to use their weapons. Don't say it. Ari shook her head and interrupted Rias before she could finish. There's still hope. He isn't responding, but I can still feel his presence in the telepathic link between us. The Gremory group looked at Ari with hope in their eyes as she continued. Also, Rost's eye on his weapon is still fully open, so his current form is still imperfect. He has yet to fully take over Naruto's body. We can still save him. Rias looked at the darkened scythe in Rost's hand and widened her eyes when she saw that Ari was right. The eye was still visible, and the pupil was moving back and forth glaring at the three members of the K/DA. Enough! Rost roared and swung his scythe, sending Akali crashing through a tree as the rogue assassin used her Kama to block his strike, being swallowed in a whirlwind of dark energy. He then grabbed Kayase by her wings and threw her into Evelyn, who caught the Void Daughter with both arms and her lashers before dashing toward them and swinging his scythe. Evelyn used her lashers to block the attack, holding it firmly above their head and giving Kayase the opening she needed to unleash a fully charged Void Blast. Surprise! But before the Daughter of the Void could do just that, Rost raised his other hand and showed them that he was holding Jin's pistol, the Whisper, which was emitting a dark red aura as he channeled his energy into it. Pulling the trigger, the Darkin fired an empowered shot at Kaisa, penetrating her suit and piercing through her abdomen. The bullet then continued to travel upward and hit the left half of Evelyn's face, blowing it apart and causing her to unwrap her lasher around his scythe before the Darkin sent her flying away with a roundhouse kick to the other side of her face. Keeping up with the momentum of his attack, Rost used his foot to knock Kaisa onto her back and then stomped hard on her head, shattering her helmet before he kicked her away as well, sending both the Void Daughter and Agony's embrace crashing into the concrete wall of the blue base, exploding violently before spider web cracks formed out from the points of impact. Eve. Kaisa. Ari cried before she turned her head back to Rost and snarled angrily at him. Wanna come and play with me, little fox? The Darkin chuckled while waving his hand tauntingly at her. Unleashing the full might of her power with all 9 tails appearing behind her, Ari dashed toward Rost, using her foxfires and orb of deception to attack him. The Darkin swung his scythe at her, but Ari's quick reflex and agility allowed her to maneuver between his swings and dodge even the deadliest of his strikes. Annoying little vixen. Rost scoffed when Ari hit his face with a bolt of energy, before a magic circle appeared on the ground beneath her feet, bearing the crest of the Kitsune Yukai clan. In a blinding flash of light, the Vastaean transformed, taking on the form of a 9-tailed fox demon with white fur and the size of a small truck, shocking Rost and those who were watching before she shot forward and crashed into the Darkin, sending him stumbling back before sending out an intense wave of foxfire, far larger and more powerful than any foxfire attacks they had ever seen her performing. Rost, who was just as surprised as he had never seen Ari performing such technique, was swallowed whole into the flame. He was quick to recover, however, and leaped out of the wave of foxfire, his body smoking and burning at several places, but it did not take it long for them to heal up. Raising his hand, the Darkin summoned a second weapon, the Azakana Blade of Yon, dominating it the very second it fully materialized. The blade then enlarged itself to fit the Darkin's grip, and Rost then wielded it along with his scythe, becoming a tornado of destruction that hacked and slashed its way toward Ari, deflecting and dispersing her flame as she tried to defend herself. Seeing that her foxfire did very little to slow Rost down, the 9-tailed Gumiho had no choice but to leap back, retreating to avoid being cut into pieces, as the size of her fox demon form proved to be a major disadvantage against his fast and violent assault. He almost succeeded in cleaving her too, if Ari hadn't reverted back to her human form and used a quick illusion spell to trick him and avoid being hit by both of his weapons. Akali, who rejoined the battle, threw her kama at Rost from behind, causing the blade to stab into his shoulder, but the Darkin merely shrugged it off before continuing on with his assault. Evelyn, Kaisa, are you two all right? Rias asked as she went over to Evelyn and Kaisa and helped them get back on their feet. Don't worry, I will be fine. Evelyn grumbled as she took Ria's hand and allowed the crimson-haired girl to pull her up. Her face began to regenerate in a similar manner to the phoenix with their injuries, even though half of it had been blown apart. I have been through worse. I will live. Kaisa said as she stood up, holding her abdomen as blood dripped from her mouth. Aquino then put her hands near Kaisa's bullet wound and casted a healing spell to help the Void Daughter recover, but there was little that she could do to help her suit, which appeared to be bleeding just like her. Thank you. Fuck, how could I forget that Rost can use his host's abilities? Evelyn cursed loudly as she glared at Rost, who was now wielding in his other hand the holy sword Starfire spellblade alongside his scythe. Rias and her group couldn't stop themselves from widening their eyes at the revelation, and it did not take it long for one like Kiba, who had spared a lot with Naruto, to see that the way Rost was wielding the holy blade, how he was moving, dodging and blocking Akali and Ari's attacks, were all Naruto's techniques. No wonder why he's even stronger than the last time I met him after he had taken over his host. Evelyn then continued in a serious tone, if we keep this on for too long, Rost might be able to start using Naruto's summoning ability, and we more or less screwed if he can do it. Who is he going to summon? Gasper asked fearfully, but he and everyone else had already known the answer. Who do you think? Evelyn growled, and Rias could feel a cold chill running down her spine at the prospect of having to fight not one, but three Darkin, as Naruto's summoning ability would no doubt allow Rost to summon to his side his Darkin brothers, Aatrox and Varus. If Rost alone was capable of such destruction, having just killed a descendant of the original Mao Beelzebub, then there was no telling what would happen if the other two were also allowed to roam free in their world, especially Aatrox. We need to beat him now, and we need to beat him fast. Easier said than done. Evelyn scoffed as Kayase gave Akino a nod of gratitude before she dashed away, rejoining Ari and Akali in their fight against Rost, who looked like he was just playing some kind of game with them as he went through Naruto's arsenal, one after another. She's right though. The longer it is, the harder it will be for us and the more Naruto's life is shortened. But, how are we going to? We might be able to help you guys with that. Before Rias could finish her question, the group heard a voice causing them to turn around to see two people walking toward them, a man with white hair, and a woman with long black hair pulled back into a high ponytail with two long bangs framing her face. They both wore identical outfits, a uniform of some sort consisting of a green flak jacket over a dark blue, long-sleeve shirt with matching colored pants and sandals, but the man also donned a short-sleeved long white haori, closed in the front by a thin, orange rope and was decorated by red flame-like motifs on the edges. In addition, their faces were hidden behind a pair of animal-styled porcelain masks. However, their appearances were not the surprising thing about them. Asia/Asia-chan/Asia-senpai. Everyone cried out as the man walked toward them while carrying an unconscious person in his arms that was none other than their friend/little sister, Asia Argento. With the only exception of Evelyn, who was gasping like a fish out of water, while looking at the two masked people with a look of shock on her face, the group gathered around the girl, with Zenobia breaking down in tears of joy as the masked man gently gave Asia to her. We found her in the dimension gap. The man explained as he stepped back and stood next to the woman. The crystal she was trapped in kept her alive long enough for us to save her. She has lost consciousness due to the pressure of the place, but she's much stronger than she appears to be. Just give her some time, and she will wake up soon. Why, you saved her. Rias sobbed as she gently stroked Asia's hair, before turning her attention back to the two masked people and lowering her head gratefully to them. Thank you. Thank you. For some reason though, Rias couldn't help but feel something awfully familiar about them, but couldn't quite place her finger around it. But, who are you? Zenobia asked as she held Asia tightly in her arms, not wanting to let her best friend go again. Why did you save her? That's not important right now. The woman answered while shaking her head. All that you need to know is that we are your friends, and we are here to help. She then turned her attention back to her companion, who seemed to be observing the fight between Rost and Ari, Kai's, and Akali in a calm manner. Not only was Rost using the Wuju technique Highlander that Naruto had mastered under the teaching of Master Yi to increase his speed, but his scythe was also leaving arcs of fire in the air as he swung it at the three female champions, having used Orn's hammer to enhance the power of his weapon with the divine flame of the Forge God, making it even harder for them to block and dodge his attacks. We need to save him now, the man said before he turned his head to the woman and asked her, "You ready?" She nodded and the two stepped forward, allowing Rias and everyone else to see the words written vertically down the back of the man's haori. Yandame Hokage. Akali grunted in pain as she was knocked onto her back, skidding on the ground for a bit before she stabbed her kunai down and managed to stop herself just in time to see Rost appearing above her, his burning scythe raised above his head as the Darkin went for the killing strike. It never came, however, and the tip of his scythe stopped just a few inches from Akali's face as the masked woman she had noticed standing with Rias and the others earlier jumped in and grabbed Rost's wrist with both of her hands, stopping him. Now, who? Before he could finish asking that question, Rost's visible eye on his Darkin weapon widened when he felt something coming toward him from behind, and snapped around just fast enough to shoot his hand up and catch a kunai that obviously did not belong to Akali, as it had 3 prongs instead of 1. The kunai also had strange wording written on the handle, but before Rost could properly read it, using Naruto's memories of the language, the masked man appeared before him in a flash of yellow, and kicked him in the head just as the woman shot forward and punched him in the gut. While the kick stunned him for a brief second, Rost could have sworn he felt his entire stomach was caved in, his rib cage cracked, and his body shook in pain as the masked woman drove her foot further into his abdomen before he was sent backwards faster than a bullet before catching himself and regaining his balance. Bringing his burning darkened scythe behind him, Rost lunged at the two with the full intention to kill, having realized that they both posed more threat to him than the others combined. The darkin swung and swiped his scythe, but unlike how it had been with Akali, who had resorted to dodging, the two seemingly had little trouble parrying and blocking his strikes, no matter how much power he put into them. Sparks flew between them as they began to push him back, before the man reached behind his cloak and took out several kunai just like the one who was wielding before throwing them at Rost. Thinking nothing of it, the darkin simply hit the kunai away with the blade of his scythe, but just when he was about to make his next move, the man once again disappeared and reappeared beside him, slamming a glowing and spinning blue orb into his side that then exploded violently and launched him away in a vortex of wind. Growling in frustration, Rost forced his body to turn around in midair and swiped his scythe, dispersing the vortex before trying to regain his balance. Before he could do that, a water dragon slammed into him, swallowing him whole before crashing him through the wall. Whoa! Akali gasped in amazement, being one of a few people in the area who could see that the two masked people were fighting at the highest level of skills. Moreover, the fact that they were wielding kunai, and the woman had performed a series of hand seals to summon that water dragon, was clear proof that they were more or less ninja with unnatural power like her former master, Shin. "Come on, Akali," Ari said as she ran past her. "Let's help them get our summoner back." Nodding, the rogue assassin picked up her kama and followed the nine-tailed Gumiho, throwing smoke bombs at Rost's face and generating dark smoke that, when combined with Evelyn's shadow, allowed high-mobility fighters like them to attack Rost without giving him the chance for counterattack. Kayase, who picked herself out of the crater Rost had sent her into with a full-powered punch using Vi's Hextech gauntlet, opened her wings and bombarded the Darkin with a swarm of plasma missiles, forcing him to take a defensive position against the full-on assault of all six of them. "Gar, you annoying people, why won't you just stand still and die?" Rost roared in annoyance as he swiped his scythe and unleashed the full might of his Darkin power, forcing the K/DA back, but not the two masked ninja, who used their wind and water bullet ninjutsu to return the favor, knocking him left and right. Ari, who had gathered enough power to transform again, leaped into the air in her nine-tailed fox form and curved into a ball, unleashing her blazing foxfire from every inch of her body before throwing herself down and slamming into Rost like a blue meteor, making him roar in pain and crashing down in an explosion with a shockwaves so strong everyone across the game field could feel it. Taking her chance while Rost had yet to pick himself up, Akali threw her kama at the scythe, securing a firm grip around it before pulling back as hard as she could. She would have succeeded if Rost wasn't so much physically stronger than she was, immediately losing her balance and almost falling over when he pulled his arm back. "Kaneko-chan!" Rias shouted to her rook as she and every single member of her peerage except for Asia and Zenobia, who was watching over her unconscious friend, ran to Akali and grabbed onto the chain of her kama to help her pull the darkened scythe out of Rost's hand. Before he could do anything to respond to this, Ari slammed into him from behind, knocking the darkin down and wrapping her tails around his limbs and torso before biting onto his neck, doing everything she could to hold him down even as he struggled violently against her hold. With another angry roar, Rost summoned Yon's Azakana blade and tried to stab Ari with it, but Evelyn and Kayase stopped him from doing so, the former of whom wrapping her lashers around his wrists and stabbing the tip into his flesh, further immobilizing him. The single visible eye of Rost on his weapon spun wildly as he desperately held onto his weapon that was slowly slipping away with the combined strength of Akali and the devils, trying to figure out a way to break himself out of this situation. For the first time ever, Rost panicked. His dark energy began to pick up, but just before he could unleash it in an explosion that would blow them all away, a set of glowing white chains shot out of the masked woman's body and wrapped themselves around his body, seemingly sealing away his power and serving to pin him down even harder. In a flash of yellow, her companion appeared above him and slammed both of his hands down Rost's chest after he had gone through a series of hand seals, causing the area to glow brightly before the masked man began to slowly push his arms into the darkened chest, ignoring the wave of dark energy that flowed violently out of the place. "Now, everyone!" The man shouted suddenly as he began to pull himself back, while slowly but surely dragging an unconscious Naruto out with him, struggling as Rost's body tried to suck him back in. Still, Rias and her peerage were joyful at the sight, which gave them the strength to pull even harder than ever. Ari, who saw the masked woman nodding her head to her, let go of Rost's neck and shot forward to bite onto the wrist of the hand holding onto his weapon, sinking her fangs into his flesh and causing the Darkin to roar in pain before finally opening his palm, causing his scythe to be flung into the air due to the combined strength of Akali, Rias and her peerage before dropping beside them. The flow of energy coming out of Rost's chest came to a sudden stop, allowing the masked man to throw himself back and pull Naruto out finally, falling on the ground while holding the young man in his arms. "No. No. Not like this!" Rost shouted in anger and frustration as he watched his pseudo-body begin to disperse, trying desperately to crawl back to it, but there was nothing that he could do as a weapon. "Not so scary now, aren't you?" As Rias and her peerage rushed over to Naruto's side in tear, Evelyn suddenly appeared above Rost and stepped on him with her left heel, grinding into the flesh near his eye as she smiled dangerously down at him. "Hello there. Can we talk about it, please?" The Darkin weapon asked nervously as he gazed at Evelyn's heel, which was drawing closer and closer to his eyes. "You know, I have a hot date with Diodora Astaroth." The demoness ignored his request and continued in a sweet tone as her lashes swung violently behind her, "But I am sure that I can make some time for you. After all, I still don't know if a weapon can feel pain or not." She then raised her heel above Rost's eye, which was spinning wildly in panic. "Oh, by the way, it's personal." "Arf. Please don't mind me." Evelyn giggled playfully while waving her hand, as Rost's scream caused the Gremory group and her fellow champions to turn their heads toward her. They then turned their attention back to Naruto when he began to stir, and realized that the two masked people weren't with them anymore. Drake! I think Evelyn recognized us," the woman stated after taking off her mask and climbing into her room through the window to avoid being seen by the tenants of her house with her husband, who did the same before a twin poof of smoke turned their hair colors back to normal, with the man having spiky blonde hair, and the woman with long, flowing red hair. "I told you changing our hair colors wasn't going to be enough, Minato." It appeared so. Minato chuckled softly as he took off his cloak and looked at his wife, Kushina, "But at least we saved Asia-chan and our son. If it causes us our identities, then it's a small price we have to pay. The two of them are safe now, and that's all that matters." The red-haired woman nodded her head with a small smile, breathing out a sigh of relief that she didn't know she had been holding. "Also, I don't think she's that sure about us just yet, so she won't tell Naruto and his friends. It's fine though. It's almost time we tell our son the truth anyway." "I know. It's just, even if she doesn't tell them right away, that lewd demon is just not going to stop bugging the two of us to confirm her suspicion now. I can just feel it." Kushina scoffed as she put her hands on her hips, her hair moving wildly behind her while Minato could only laugh nervously in response. "It's bad enough that she spends the majority of her daily life here in our home trying to corrupt Naruto-kun and the girls, especially Asia-chan, even with Graphia-san being there to watch her. I don't know if I can keep it if she turns her attention to us instead. That woman has no shame. She fought to save our son, Kushina. She might be a bit off, but there are goods in her." Minato stated with a smile, though he was unsure of his choice of words to describe Evelyn. "Our son saw it in her, and that's why he took her in and let her live with us. Don't you remember she shielded you from the explosion when that fallen angel attacked our house? Humph. One of the only good things she had ever done around here." Kushina huffed as she crossed her arms on her chest, making Minato chuckle in amusement. "Come on, let's change before Naruto and his friends return. I have a feeling that they will bring him home after everything that happened." Chapter 43. I see, so that's what happened. Naruto said, nodding his head in understanding as he stared down at his hands. The blonde was currently in his room, sitting on his bed while being surrounded by Rias, his friends and champions, including Sona, who had taken some time off from work so that she could help take care of him. It had been a week since the battle against the old malfaction of the Chaos Brigade, but the Gremory group and their friends had yet to be able to return to their normal daily life, mostly because they were all worried about Naruto, who had been unconscious the entire time. Having only woken up an hour ago, he had completely missed the sport festival, though the blonde heard that Momo had filled in his place and won the three-legged race with Asia. Their training wasn't for nothing after all. Surzex, Michael and Azazel were also present as well via communication magic circle, and the three had been filling them in with what had been happening after the incidents. With the help of the Norse gods led by Odin, the Alliance had triumphed over their enemies, and the surviving servants and members of the old malfaction had all been captured and imprisoned for interrogations, which were being carried out by none other than Evelyn herself. After a short discussion with the other leaders and Graphia, who had vouched for Evelyn in his stead, Surzex had allowed the Demonis to join the Alliance's newly formed intelligence unit, and since Evelyn was a demon who specialized and took great pleasure in tortures, it did not take it long for her to be recognized for her efficiency, as she was capable of making even the toughest prisoners talk by just spending a few sweet minutes with them. Within half a day, she had also raised to become the leader of the integration force, though Naruto couldn't help but have a feeling that everyone was actually just too scared of Evelyn to not let her take charge. Without a doubt, the one Evelyn had been torturing the most had been Diodora Astaroth, even though Naruto was told that he had cowardly spilled everything he knew about Chaos Brigade the moment Evelyn stepped into the room with that sickeningly sweet smile of hers. Those who had been there to watch the interrogation could tell how much Evelyn had actually enjoyed torturing the former high-class devil for what he had done and intended to do to Asia, as well as the fact that he had a hand in Naruto's current condition. Evelyn had spent hours upon hours torturing Diodora in ways that even those who had lived for so long like Azazel and Michael did not know about, making him scream and cry as painfully as possible, and then ordering the healers to heal his wounds and wake him up so she could repeat the process over and over and over and over again. Evelyn had clearly made it personal, and in all honesty, Naruto didn't mind letting her continue one bit. He had a feeling that Rias and everyone else, with the only obvious exception being Asia, shared the same thought. Nevertheless, because of Diodora's betrayal, it appeared that the Astaroth devil household had lost all their trusts and influences in the devil faction. Ajuka Beelzebub, the former heir of the devil clan, had been asked to take full responsibility for the scandal by the devils of the Great King faction, even though they wouldn't be able to do anything else to him with Surzex, and the Mao backing him up and defending him. Right now, losing Ajuka Beelzebub will be fatal for the devils and our alliance in the war against Chaos Brigade. Azazel explained he is an extraordinary inventor, the one who created the evil peace system and set up the core concept for the brave saint and one of the most powerful devils in the underworld. You can't simply find another one of his calibers nowadays. Surzex carried on with a small sigh. Still, the Astaroth sure has suffered some considerable damage. It will probably take some time for them to regain their political status among us. They have also severed all ties with Diodora, and thus he's no longer their heir. I have yet to learn the details, but it appears that Latia Astaroth, Ajuka's niece, and the eldest child of the branch family of the Astaroth house, has been chosen to become their future leader. Latia? Rias repeated the name, with her eyes widening in surprise. When she saw that everyone was looking at her expectantly, the crimson-haired heiress wasted no time to explain she and I are old acquaintance. We used to hang out with each other years ago at parties for children of the 72 Pillars. She's very kind and humble, and I don't think I have ever seen her raising her voice against the servants and lower-class devils. Let's hope that she's strong enough to face the challenges ahead. It will take a lot from her to restore the Astaroth clan to its former reputation. Azazel stated, making everyone nod their head in understanding. Speaking of, with Diodora and Zephyrdal both out of the competition, we need to reconsider the Youth Devil rating game tournament as well. The organizers suggested we start over, but the fans are obviously not patient. patient enough to wait for the battle between Rias and Serord Bale. Surzex pointed out it's the most wanted match of the tournament, one that everyone, including those from other factions, wished to see no matter the cost. The match between Sona Citri and Sikvera Agars is also highly anticipated, due to how similar the styles of the two kings are. Naruto could see that. With Sikvera and Sona Citri, it would be a match of tactics versus tactics, where the two girls would try to outsmart each other while moving their servants around the field, taking as many objectives as possible. The match between them and Serord, meanwhile, would be one that was all about strengths and powers. That's not to say that Serord's peerage wasn't capable of devising and working around a strong tactics on the Devil's Rift, but they were a group known strongly for their overwhelming strength, especially that of Serord, the current strongest youth. And Naruto. Yes, Surzex-san. Don't use Darkin weapons again. Surzex said seriously, and Naruto showed no surprise, having been expecting to hear it from Rias' brother after the crimson-haired Mao himself had told him what had happened. They are undoubtedly powerful, but the risks of using those weapons are way too high now for you. We almost lost you when Ross took control of your body, not to mention that your life force has been greatly diminished as well by him. Right now, your lifespan is even shorter than that of an average human. Any attempt to use a Darkin weapon from now on will possibly cost you your life. Naruto stared down at his hands, hanging his head in shame as his friends looked at him sadly, knowing very well that Rias and the girls had been crying, even though they were trying their best to not show it to him. Anyone who was familiar with League and its lore knew that Darkin weapons harvested the life force of their hosts, and when one was able to wrest absolute control of a body, the process sped up even more, eventually completely depleting the mortal's energy, condemning the Darkin to a fate of moving from host to host to gain a mockery of freedom. The total lifespan of a devil was approximately 10,000 years, but now, his had been reduced to less than 100, as Azazel had told him after doing a test a couple of days ago. Though, it was also the reason why they had been able to save him from Rost, for if he had had the lifespan of a normal human, he would have been taken completely over by the Darkin and lost his life, not to mention that it put an immense strain on his body. Even now, Naruto could barely feel his legs and his arms. He really had no idea if he could even walk or even use his hands properly. But for him, those weren't even the worst part of it. They all tried to convince him that it was Rost, but Naruto knew he was the one to blame for Ari, Kayase and Akali's injuries, with Evelyn taking the worst of it, but at least she healed fast, while the other three had had to stay in the hospital for a few days to recover. Hey, cheer up, kid. It's not like you to look so down like that. Azazel suddenly said, a small grin on his face as he reminded him, Kaneko can recover your lost life force with Senjutsu. Kuroka has also agreed to help with the medication, so stop looking like it's the end of the world. We are not going to let you die anytime soon. I know. Naruto nodded his head finally, glancing at Kaneko and giving her a grateful smile when he saw the unflinching resolve in her golden eyes while looking at him. Just promise us that it will not happen again. I promise, Surzex-san. Naruto said, smiling a little as the others looked at him in relief. Well then. I guess that will be all for now. Surzex nodded his head with a smile to Naruto before announcing. You will be informed as soon as the details of the match between you and Serord are decided. I will also contact you as soon as I have any new news about the two ninjas who helped save Naruto Koen. An investigation is being carried out as we speak. Thank you, Oni-sama. Ria smiled gratefully at her brother. I'll see you guys later. Got some important work to do right now. With a wave of his hand, Azazel ended the call and his hologram disappeared. Have a good day, everyone. I will see you later. Michael also left and Surzek's image shortly disappeared after he had bid his goodbye to them. Naruto, would you like to eat anything? Rias asked as she and everyone turned back to Naruto, but trailed off toward the end when she saw that her boyfriend had already passed out, snoring quietly as he slept while still sitting. Gently, Ari and Sona laid him down on his bed, and pulled the blanket up to cover his body before they all took their leave from the room. He's okay now, and that's all that mattered to them. Chapter 44. 2 weeks after the battle against the Old Mouth faction of the terrorist group Chaos Brigade and Diodora Astaroth, Naruto found himself sitting in the ORC clubroom, doing his homework with Asia. He wanted to play League and all 5 PCs in the room were available for gaming, but of course Rias would not let him play before he had caught up on 2 entire weeks worth of missed schoolwork, having had to stay at home to focus on his recovery. Even though he was doing so much better now, Naruto still had to take his medications regularly, and at least for time being, he would also have to stay away from the fighting. It's not like he wasn't ready for it, far from it even, as he had been training and working out daily to improve his condition. The doctors who had been helping him, and even his friends wanted him to take things slowly, not wanting Naruto to risk it and break himself down when his body had only just finished building itself back up again, as he had been suffering the physical traumas of being taken over by a Darkin, which were worse enough to keep him bedridden and then wheelchair-ridden for an entire week and a half. As much as he wanted to show them that he was alright, Naruto did not want to make Rias and any of his friends worry again, and had decided to do as they wished. Plus, it's not like he was in a rush or anything like that. Currently, there weren't many things that required Naruto to use his offensive skill sets, beside the on and off stray devil hunting, but his champions, like Ari and Evelyn, or even Sona, who had been living with them again, were more than happy to help him and Rias with them whenever they weren't super busy. Moreover, the match against Serord and his peerage had been postponed until Naruto had fully recovered. It had been requested by the Belair himself, as he wished to fight the Gremory peerage when they were at their full strengths, with Naruto being the one who he looked forward to facing the most on the battlefield. It was a respectable decision, and Naruto couldn't help but feel the same towards Serord, knowing full well that the strongest youth devil would be the ultimate test to his bond with his champions. Naruto was confident that if he could grow even stronger than he was now, he could defeat Serord in an all-out 1v1 fight, but just like League, the new rating game mode was a team game, and it had never been all about defeating your enemies individually. It did not matter how many times he knocked down an opponent like Serord, something that Naruto had no doubt would be an extremely difficult task to do. As long as his team could still secure the game's objectives, the Belair could still win the game, and dropping a match had never been something that the Gremory group, wanted to do, let alone a match against Serord and his peerage of all people. So, if I remember correctly, it's almost time for the annual school trip to Kyoto for the 2nd year, right? Rias asked, while elegantly drinking the tea Akino made for her. Yes, Bucho-san. The trip will be in 2 weeks. Irina answered while beaming radiantly. As far as he was concerned, the trip was the only thing his classmates had been talking about, and the church trio had been no exception. To say that the three, especially Irina and Asia, had been looking forward to the trip was an understatement. Zenobia had been keeping her cool, as always, but Naruto could see that she too was very excited. We also went to Kyoto last year, Akino said as she put a bowl of biscuits down the table before Naruto, making the blonde smile at her thankfully before grabbing a bite. I went to Kinkakuji, Ginkakuji, and many other places with Bucho. Rias nodded and continued her queen's words. But there are a limited number of places you can visit in just 3 days and 4 nights. You should think about making a plan beforehand and following through on it. If you don't include time for eating and for sightseeing, you'll definitely regret it. You will move from one place to another using mainly buses and trains, but a lot of time will be wasted if you move around on those vehicles. Thanks, Rias. I will make sure to keep that in mind. Naruto grinned at his girlfriend, making her beam at him. It was a shame that we didn't think it through about transport time. Akino then explained with a giggle, hiding her smile behind her hand as she looked at her best friend Bucho wanted to go everywhere. She was so excited, so we ran out of time to go to Nijuju Garden, which we had planned to see last. She was literally bouncing on her feet at the train station. Mao, you promised me you would keep this between us, remember? Rias asked, pouting a bit as her cheeks reddened. I was so excited. You know me. I loved Japan, and it was Kyoto, which I admired so much, so I was hooked on the souvenir shops more than necessary. I mean, we have teleportation magic, why don't you? No, no, Naruto, you don't understand. Ria stopped him before he could finish asking the question, before she went on to explain to him with her eyes sparkling in excitement using magic circles to travel to a place like Kyoto is tasteless. I wouldn't do something like that. It felt so much better to be able to walk there on my own feet and feel the wind with my own skin, you know. As I said, she was very excited. Akino told him with a soft laugh, making Naruto chuckle at his girlfriend in amusement. Seeing the way her boyfriend and everyone else were looking at her, Rias coughed into her hand and decided to change the subject. Ahem, the trip is important, but we also need to discuss what we are going to do for the school festival. Ah, that's right. The school festival is also close. Akino nodded her head in confirmation. Our school doesn't have much break time between the sports festival, the school trip, and the school festival, so they all take place very close to each other. Yes, that's why we now need to discuss the school festival and prepare for it as well. Ria said as she then received a sheet of paper from Akino. She would need to write down their plan on the sheet and submit it to the student council later. If we decide it now, the rest of us third-year and first-year members can prepare while you are gone. There are so many members this year, so we shouldn't have too much problem with the preparation. I sure have transferred to Kuo at a good time. Irina chirped before striking a praying pose with her hands clasping together. This must have been Michael-sama's guidance. I like these school events. The sport festival was awesome, so I will be looking forward to the next two. Zenobia said with a nod. She was as impassive as ever, but her eyes were glowing the same way Irina's were. She had been excited for the sport festival too, having taken first places in every sport that she participated in. What did you guys do for last year anyway? Naruto asked curiously. We hosted a haunted house. Kiba answered with a small smile. It was very successful, and the house became the talk of everyone for the next couple of months. Yeah, we did use real ghosts, so it was actually very scary. Rias nodded, making Naruto and those who did not know pale slightly. Are really? Naruto asked, chuckling nervously. They were yokai, actually. Rias assured him with a soft laugh. They are the types who don't harm humans. These yokai were also in trouble because they didn't have a job, so asking for their help was good for both sides. It was thanks to them that our haunted house was a huge success. Still, after the festival ended, we were reprimanded by the student council. Akino informed them while giggling softly. Sona Kaishu, who at that time was the vice president, yelled at us, saying that we broke the rules for using the real things. Are we going to do another haunted house this year, Ria-sama? Ravel asked. I don't know, honestly. I want to stick to something simple but impactful, but at the same time, I want to try something new too. Ria said, tapping her chin thoughtfully before an idea came to her mind after taking a glance at her boyfriend. How about? Just before Rias was about to announce her idea to her club, Rosweiss entered the room with a serious look on her face, with Azazel following closely behind her. The fallen angel/chemistry teacher/advisor of the Occult Research Club looked as laid back as ever, but the meaningful smile on his face showed that something was about to happen. Guys, we are going to have a guest. The governor of Grigori informed them, but before anyone could ask him about it, the magic circle in the corner of the clubroom suddenly lit up, and from there an extremely tall and muscular man appeared, with short-cropped blonde hair and neatly trimmed beard, looking to be in his 30s. His clothing was fairly simple, consisting of a blank electric blue shirt, worn under a leather jacket, and dark blue jeans. He was holding in his hand a closed umbrella, and although it looked perfectly normal, anyone in the room could sense a tremendous amount of power coming from it, the like of which Naruto had only felt once before during the Battle of Reykjavik when he struck down Cao Cao with his own spear and thundered god Orn's hammer. After it had been empowered by Thor's divine lightning. Hello there, everyone. The man greeted them with a wide but friendly grin, which seemed to spread across his face from one ear to another. Sorry to drop by unannounced. Thor-sama. Rosweiss bowed respectfully to the man, confirming Naruto's suspicion of him being the Norse god of thunder and lightning as they all looked at him in shock and amazement, raising from their seats to properly and politely greet Thor. They had all met Odin, but the chief deity of Norse mythology was a pervert old man, and despite his ridiculous strength that he had showcased when he helped them in the fight against Kao's brigade, his personality made it hard for them, especially Naruto, to give him even an ounce of respect. His son Thor, on the other hand, was an entirely different story. "Please raise your heads. There's no need for you to bow." Thor smiled at the former Valkyrie and everyone else when they tried to follow her example, giving them a nod of acknowledgement before he looked directly at Naruto. "What's up, Naruto Uzumaki? Been wanting to meet you ever since you pulled that lightning hammer trick in Reykjavik. Love that one, by the way." The Norse god of thunder praised, gesturing to Naruto with his umbrella, which then crackled with electricity. It didn't take a genius to figure out that the umbrella was Mjolnir. After that, it did not take it long for the Norse god of thunder to settle down, sitting on the couch across from Rias and Naruto as they sat with each other, facing him, while the rest of the club took their seats on the chairs around the clubroom. "Would you like to drink some tea, Thor-sama?" Akino offered after she had put down 2 cups of green tea before Rias and Naruto. "Thank you, my dear, but I don't drink tea." Thor declined with a shake of his head, smiling at Akino before noticing Rosweiss walking over to him with a mug of beer. "Ah yes, always so thoughtful. Really make me wonder why the old man fired you, Rosie." "Odin-sama has his reasons, Thor-sama," Rosweiss replied as he handed the mug over to Thor, who took it from the former Valkyrie and drank half of the drink in one go. While she did not show it and she appeared to be content with her life as a devil and her high paycheck right now, it was quite clear to everyone that Rosweiss had yet to get over the fact that she was left behind by her former boss. Either way, I am glad that you have found a new home among these folks. I know you will do well with them." Thor nodded his head at her, before turning his attention back to Naruto and Rias, specifically the former. "So anyway, I'm glad that we have finally had the chance to meet, Naruto Uzumaki and friends. Been hearing a lot about you guys as well. Only good things, I hope," Naruto jokingly said. "Both good and bad things. I mean, your unique skills allow you to summon some really beautiful and talented girls to our world," Thor answered, obviously referring to Sona and the K/DA me. "I have never been an investor in the music industry, so I don't think too much of it, but you can imagine words of jealousy and curses that specifically targeted you have been thrown around there, and they're even in Asgard." "Yeah, I can imagine that," Naruto snickered. During his stay in the underworld, he had met jealous fans who wanted him dead because of how close he was to Sona and the K/DA. Having left his mailbox in Ravel's care, Naruto had not checked it for a while now, knowing that if there was anything important his manager would immediately inform him, but the blonde did not need to ask her to know that his inbox was filled with spams and hate mails from his champion's fans, the crazier ones at least. His ability to summon his champions made almost everyone believe that he also had full control over them, and therefore he could get them to do whatever he wanted, making their admirers think that he was living the dream with the girls while they could only gaze upon them from afar. Sure, he had been having that kind of sexual relationship with Evelyn, but it was an entirely different story, and he would never force his champions to do something that they did not want to do, just because he could. "So anyway, I heard about what happened from the old man," Thor then continued, maintaining a light and casual tone. "I also heard you turned yourself into a big monster with razor-sharp teeth, glowing red eyes, wielding scythe like a grim reaper. What do you call it again, Darren? Darkfin? It's Darkin. Corrupted god warriors, yes?" Naruto nodded his head in confirmation. "I did some research. Been thinking about trying out League 2, but my friends who had played it advised me otherwise." Yeah. It's best that you stay away from the game." Naruto chuckled. "You can enjoy everything else that it provides, just make sure that you prepare yourselves for it if you really want to play the game, mentally and physically." "Ha! Sounds like a challenge." "I do love a challenge," Thor proudly declared, holding his mug in the air like a warrior celebrating, or mentally preparing himself to go to war. Knowing how League was almost better than anyone else in the room, Thor might as well go to war the moment he queued up. Speaking of challenges, I do look forward to facing against Bale. The lad is one of the most impressive youngsters the world has seen in a couple hundred years. His individual strength is something that even us gods speak highly about when we talk about you folks, so I can't wait to see someone of his generation finally giving him his first defeat. It won't be easy though. I never said it would be, but it will be the reason the match is going to be so fun to watch. Thor chuckled before he finished his drink and put the empty mug down the table to stand up, with the Gremory group doing the same. I guess that will be all. Focus on your recovery for the time being, Naruto Uzumaki. I will be looking forward to seeing you back in action. Thank you. Naruto grinned and took Thor's hand when he offered it to him. As he had expected, the Norse god of thunder had an insanely strong grip, even though he did not look like he was trying to squeeze his hand at all. Take care of yourself, Rosie. Thor smiled at Rosweiss before he walked toward the magic circle in the room and pointed his umbrella at it, making the circle lit up and changing its patterns to that of the Norse deities. Let's meet again in the near future, everyone. Take care. And with that, Thor left, teleporting away using the magic circle, and allowing the ORC to return to their daily club activities after school. Not knowing that they would be meeting the Norse god a lot sooner than expected. To be continued. That's it for this reading. Hit like and subscribe for a free ticket pass going to the different worlds of anime fanfictions. Looking forward to having you on board again.